The planet slowly burned under the violet skies of the Calarian Empire. They called it Vin-X, and it was a lush Midim colony world with over 10 million people, mostly members of the United Terran Alliance. It had been a peaceful place once settled, by terraformers and scientists far from the front lines of galactic politics. That was before the Kellerans came with their dreadnoughts and ion lances, declaring the world strategically important to imperial interests. What followed wasn't war, it was slaughter. The Kellerans didn't believe in prisoners. Their doctrine was clear: subjugate or destroy the Varan militia. Within 5 days, orbital bombings had put an end to all resistance, and cities turned into craters. Earth was 47 parsecs away when the last human message that an old listening post on Luna picked up was just 3 words: "They're killing everyone." The Kelleran High Command thought that no one would come. The United Terran Alliance hadn't used its main fleet in more than 20 years, and most people thought it was just for show, a holdover from old wars and grudges. From the bridge of the UTS Revenant, humanity told the galaxy in a soft voice that they were wrong. Admiral Riker Voss looked through the window and saw the stars move like fire streaks. His fleet was in fold space, riding the faster-than-light currents that changed the way things were around his ship. Orion Task Group Alpha, which was made up of 25 ships, was the most feared group in the history of the Terran Navy. A young officer walked up to him with his eyes wide with worry. "Admiral," he said, "we have full sensor telemetry from the Vernon system. Kelleran ships are still in orbit. 4 dreadnoughts, 2 carriers, and at least 20 Frigg Riker didn't blink at civilian casualties." The officer hesitated. "Estimates suggest over 6 million dead, sir, with the rest still unaccounted for." There was a silence as thick as space itself. Then Riker Voss, veteran of the Titan Uprising, scourge of the Zarnathi Wars, and hero of the Lunar Brink, turned to his command staff and said, "Prepare the fleet for burning." His voice was as cold as iron, and he said, "We arrive in 12 minutes. Tell the Kelleran." He paused, then smiled grimly. Earth got the message from Kelleron. Admiral Exhale Threx stood on the Vorschool with his command dreadnought and watched as a warning flashed across the tactical display. He frowned and saw new signatures coming from Fold Space Multiple. "Pirates?" "No, Admiral," a sensor officer answered. "Human fleet military configuration. 26 ships were found, and one of them had the signature of the UTS Revenant." "That's a myth, sir," the Revenant growled. "They came!" the Threx yelled, his tentacles twitching. "Good! Let them come! We'll break their spirits like we broke their colony!" The humans didn't respond in the usual way, so the Revenant didn't even slow down. Instead, it fired Arc-class, kinetic rods and dense tungsten spears that were sped up to relativistic speeds. They were physics, not energy, so shields couldn't stop them. Physics didn't bargain. 3 Kelleran frigates vanished in quiet fireballs before anyone could react. A few seconds later, the Aegis Lance 8 Terran heavy cruiser came crashing down from Fold Space, sending a shockwave that shook gravity sensors. It then sent out swarms of autonomous drones, tiny AI-guided assassins that slipped past shielding and bored into the hulls of enemy ships like termites, and metal inside the Vorul. Threx's second-in-command screamed, "They're cutting through our command lines every channel. They're jamming us. No, they're hunting us on the ground." The surviving humans huddled in the ruins of Viraen's capital. The Kellerans had rounded up thousands for execution. Among the survivors was a young medic named Lena, Miles, who'd stayed behind to care for the wounded. She looked up when the sky lit up blue with plasma storms, then red, then blinding white. And then she heard a sound no human had heard in decades, a sound both ancient and righteous, the Terran. Fleet war horn. It wasn't broadcast for the enemy. It was a message to the survivors. You are not alone above Vonix. Space burned. The Revenant plunged into the heart of the Kelleran formation like a blade into flesh. Its railgun shattered another. Dreadnought the Terran fleet moved like a school of sharks, in perfect sync, brutally, and with careful planning behind every move. The Kellerans' response was chaos. Their formations broke. Their carriers tried to run away, but were cut in half by the Sabre-class corvettes flying in tight formations and firing fusion torpedoes directly into the Revenant's exposed reactor cores. Admiral Voss stood unmoved. All ships he ordered enter Phase 2. Phase 2 wasn't about victory. It was about message. When the Kelleran Empire had glassed the colony, they'd broadcast the execution of Vern's governor to dozens of worlds. Now Earth responded. In kind, but not with death. With precision, human Marines launched drop pods from orbit. Their armor jet black and loaded with adaptive AI made them ghosts among fire. They didn't just rescue civilians. They hunted the execution squads dragging Kelleran. Commanders from bunkers and transmitting live feeds of their arrests across the Kelleran border systems. One Kelleran commander begged for mercy on an open frequency. Voss responded in 3 words. No more warnings in under 3 hours, the Kelleran. Occupation was obliterated. Of the original 26 ships in the Terran fleet, only 1 was lost, and even that was after its crew had manually detonated the core to take down a Kelleran carrier mid-ram. The Revenant remained in orbit from its hull high-owered. Drones dropped a package's medicine shelter modules and water purifiers for the survivors. The Earth hadn't just come to get revenge, it had also come to rebuild. Later, when the stars settled down and the fires went out, the Galactic Newset was shocked that Earth had answered and remembered. Admiral Va was alone in his room and was looking at a screen that showed the names of the dead. He clenched his teeth and reached for a small locket that had a picture of his cousin who had lived on Von X. Her name was on the list, and he closed his eyes. With deep lines of pain and pride in his worn-out face, he whispered, "They thought no one would come." But they were wrong. My name is Natalie Williams, and I'm 28 years old. As I drove toward my youth, when I got home after 5 years away, my hands were sweating against the steering wheel. Now I was coming back with a colonel's badge hidden in my bag. My family had always laughed off my military career as they had no idea that tomorrow at my dad's work event, everything would be different. I parked in the driveway, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. Before I go on with this story, I would love to know where you are when you watch. Leave your address in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, if your family has ever put you down, this story will show you how sweet it is to be praised. Can taste. As soon as I walked through the front door of the house where I grew up, I was struck by how little had changed. The hallway was still lined with faded family pictures, and the worn-out furniture was still there. The living room, and the same judgment hung in the air. My youth in a small Montana town was kept alive like a time capsule. Right down to the old curtains that my mother Diana had always refused to get new ones for. "Natalie, you made it." My mom called me from the kitchen instead of coming to meet me. Her voice was filled with a hint of disappointment. It always did when they talked to me instead of my brother Gregory. I put my bag down and walked around the house, running my fingers along surfaces I knew. Albert's dad had worked at Pinnacle Defense Systems for more than 30 years, moving up from engineer to senior manager, executive through hard work and networking. Our family was centered on his professional success and the shadow it cast for my brother to follow. "Your brother will be here soon," my mother told me as I walked into the kitchen. She was just promoted again and is now a senior project manager. "We're so proud of her." Voice was clear. It was the kind she never used when talking about my job. I answered, "That's great." The words felt automatic after years of use. I had to praise him. While she was making dinner, my mom kept talking about Gregory and Megan, their new house, and all that they did at work that made them the golden children of our family. She never asked me about my life or job. I said goodbye and went upstairs to my old bedroom. Like everything else, it stuck in time were high school cheerleading trophies academic awards, and letters of acceptance to college, still hung on the walls and shelves. My parents had kept everything from before I made the bad decision to, instead of getting a business degree, join ROTC. What they didn't show were any recognition of my time in the service, no pictures of my commissioning ceremony, and no shadow boxes of things I've done. There are no newspaper pieces about deployments or promotions that stand out to them. I wasted a lot of potential when I picked service over success in business. Sitting on my childhood bed and running, my hand over the familiar quilt, I thought of the night I told them about my ROC grant. My dad looked at me so sad that I almost cried. I changed my mind. The military is for people who have no other choice. Natalie, he told me, you are smarter than that. Gregory was being trained at Pinnacle to follow in my dad's path. My brother was excited about the plan, enjoying the privilege and taking every chance to tell me how much more successful he would be. I carefully took out the garment bag that had my dress uniform in it from my trunk. Tomorrow was the yearly leadership conference for Pinnacle, Defense Systems, and my dad told me about it. Their office, that CEO Shannon Murphy would be there. What my family didn't know was that I was now in the military, the person in charge of the $1. $2 billion military deal between the Army and Pinnacle is I ran my finger over the Silver Eagle, which was a symbol of the place I had earned through years of hard work and skill. I earned my colonel's badge faster than almost anyone else in the history of my division. At age 28, I was one of the newest colonels in the modern Army work on cyber defense systems, which are the cutting edge of technology. As promised, I carefully hung up my uniform in the closet, making sure it was covered by some old clothes. For tonight, I would put up with one more family dinner full of insults and dismissals. Tomorrow would be something different. The doorbell rang to let me know Gregory was here. I took a deep breath. I shook my head like I was about to fight and went downstairs to face my family. The dining room seemed smaller. I felt smaller than I remembered because of all the big personalities at the table. My brother Gregory had arrived. My cousin and his wife Megan were both dressed in expensive business casual clothes that made them look like they were big business stars. Tiffany was also asked, which wasn't a surprise since she worked in finance. Natalie, you were a director at a well-known bank and were often held up as another example of someone I should have tried to be like. Tiffany, I remember my mom telling me, as if we hadn't grown up together, she just closed a multi-million-dollar deal for her bank. Hi, Tiffany, I told her with a real smile. Unlike my immediate family, Tiffany was always nice to me, even when she didn't agree with the decisions I made. She gave me a quick hug and said, Nat, it's good to see you again. It's been way too long. The first chat continued. Nice as we ate from the dishes my mom had made. My father, Albert, sat at the head of the table and sometimes checked his work email on his phone, even though my mom told him not to, giving him snide looks. So, Dad? Gregory started staring. He told himself, I wanted to tell you about the new project I'm in charge of. Shannon chose the project himself. That's my boy Shannon Murphy, my dad said with pride, leading the team. Does not give out tasks without thought. You must have impressed her a lot. Well, Gregory kept shooting me a glare to make sure I was still paying attention. It's been years since you worked on this project, Shannon. My new point. A view could help move things along faster, he says. I held my tongue because I knew the project was actually the Army contract I was in charge of at the time. If only they knew how much power I really had over whether Gregory's new job was a success or failure, my mother Diana jumped in right. A way to show off Gregory's accomplishment. Tell them about the staff you're in charge of now, dear Gregory. You puffed up 12 direct reports, including 2. They were top engineers who had worked for the company for more than 20 years and didn't like having to answer to someone. Younger, but they forgot about it when they saw my results. That's great, my mom cooed and then turned to me with a Natalie. How is your job going? Are you still in the same position? I understood what she meant when she said job instead of career. Things are going well, I told her, but I wasn't ready to stay that way, to share my promotion, but I was still a captain or something. My dad asked in a vague way, not even knowing the right progression through the military ranks or something like that. I replied while taking a bite of mom-added mashed potatoes to avoid going into more detail. You know, Tiffany had just bought a beautiful new downtown home with 3 bedrooms and a beautiful view of the mountains. Tiffany looked uncomfortable. At being used as a comparison point again, it is really not that impressive, she added, graciously. Just good market timing. Still, my mom went on. It's great to see young people getting established and building wealth instead of moving around all the time. The jab at my military life was clear. I had lived in 4 different 8 years ago. I moved between 8 states and 2 countries, which my mother thought was unsettling and irresponsible. The CEO is coming tomorrow. My dad changed the subject, which was a relief. To look over our branch. It's a big deal that Shannon Murphy doesn't go to regional offices often. I already have my presentation, Gregory bragged to Shannon. Emailed me to say she's looking forward to my innovation idea. Is there anything special I should know? Planned for the visit? I asked my dad in jest. He nodded. Full staff meeting review of the projects and a special message about the military contract. A colonel is supposed to show up as the Pentagon representative, but I don't think they'll send someone that important. Most likely they'll send a major who will be pleased by. I forced a smile as I thought about our plan. That sounds interesting, but not really, Gregory. Military people laugh and say that they don't understand business. They only do what they're told and check off the boxes. Tiffany frowned and said, That's not fair. But my brother was on a roll now. Come on. We all know it's true. The military is just a backup plan for people who... You can't hide behind ranks and rules in the real world of competition. My mother agreed. We all agreed that you were very smart, Natalie, which is why it hurt so much when you chose that road. I asked with a raised voice, What exactly do you think I do in the Army? Push papers and follow rules. My dad shrugged. Yes, it's important work, but it's not exactly hard for someone with that you could be. You'll never be anything there, Gregory laughed. 10 years from now on, you'll still be taking orders while I run my own section. The words hurt, even though I had done well. Years of therapy had helped me understand that the acceptance of my family shouldn't matter anymore, but old wounds were still very fresh. Tiffany tried to protect me, but I think Natalie made the right choice. It was a waste, my mother sighed. All that promise. Remember how your teachers told you that one day you could run your own business? I pushed food around my plate while they kept talking about my supposed mistakes and missed chances. The conversation went on. Gregory's upcoming trip to Hawaii, Megan's new job at her law company, and Tiffany's investment portfolio. No one asked about my recent mission or the training I had gone through. After pie was served, my dad talked about how important tomorrow's meeting was for his job again. Into peak. This deal could be the last thing that gets me to vice president. I nodded kindly, knowing that everything would be different tomorrow, but not in the way he thought it would. Later that. And that night, I went back to my old bedroom and listened to the familiar sounds of the house settling down from down the hall. I could still hear my parents praising Gregory's accomplishments. He really is exceptional, my mom was, telling Shannon. It would be silly not to see that he has what it takes to be a top leader. I closed my eyes and traced the colonel's fingers. Badge I had lost in my bag. Tomorrow could not come fast enough. I couldn't fall asleep as I looked at the glow-in-the-dark stars that were still stuck to my ceiling. They would remind me of when I was a kid, and my back then, before Gregory started. Working at Pinnacle, and before I decided to join, potential was judged in a different way. They saw something in me at the RODC, but that changed the moment I picked a different road than the one they had planned. I remember sitting at this table as a sophomore with a ROC brochure that explains how the program will pay for a year of college my education and give me a job path I found meaningful. My dad was in the military. Had asked, his face changing, shape as if I had told him to become a street artist. That's for people who can't, Natalie. Get real work. I said, that's a real job, and that's what I want. My mom and dad looked at each other worriedly. But what about law school or business you always said you wanted? To work at Pinnacle one day. No, they always said I had just nodded. They told me to be the daughter they wanted. But when I stood my ground, the subtle, my accomplishments in RODC were not recognized when I was commissioned. As a second lieutenant, Tiffany was the only person who helped me. She drove 6 hours to be there when my parents suddenly my dad had to work because Gregory was promoted to junior analyst at Pinnacle. Framed while my military portrait stayed in a drawer. But even though they were fired, my business did very well. Early on, it was clear that they were good at systems analysis and computer security. By 23, I was made captain and put in charge of a special unit that was coming up with ways to defend against new cyber threats. I was a major by age 26 after leading a task group that found and stopped a sophisticated attack on military assets, which saved many lives. Secret papers, and maybe even lives, were in Captain Eleanor Grant's hands. First real mentor who saw promise in me that my family wouldn't see. Williams, she had told him after a particularly hard workout, "You think differently than the others. That will get you places." With her help, I learned to trust my gut and use my special skills. Point of view. When a regular security check showed trends that other people had missed, Eleanor pushed me to look into them. Further, the study eventually found a coordinated plan to break into several defense systems. After that, I led an operation that got me promoted to lieutenant colonel quickly and put me on the radar of the Pentagon. At that point, Eleanor had directly recommended me for the top liaison job, which is what they are developing the next wave of security protocols. She said, "We need someone who knows someone who can talk to both military and business, people about technical and strategy issues worlds." When she put the silver eagle of full colonel on my uniform 3 weeks ago, many important people were there. Generals and Pentagon officials, but not my family. I hadn't even told them I got promoted. Years of being fired had learned me not to need their praise. Colonel Williams' General Eleanor had said afterward, "I hope you understand what an accomplishment this is." Youngest colonel in the history of the Cyber Command. I knew that. But tomorrow it would be the first time my family knew what I had really done. The biggest deal was worth $1. $2 million, billion to build. Advanced cybersecurity tools for the military. As a liaison, I had final I agree with all important decisions, technical details, and budget allocations. To use the simplest terms, I would be in charge of my dad and brother's work. It was almost too funny, because for years they had put down my dad and brother. I helped them make a job choice, and now I had a lot of power over the project that could affect their future careers. I got out of bed and took my uniform out of the bag. The dark blue fabric was spotless, and the brass buttons looked great. My childhood bedroom was dark, but the rows of ribbons and medals sparkled. I ran my fingers over them, standing for the mission's accomplishments and sacrifices that my family didn't know about. The light caught on the silver eagle patch on the uniform jacket as I turned it over in my hands. I thought of my dad. They said, "Ranks don't mean anything in the real world." Natalie, this is Natalie. What you can do, not what title they give you. He would find out tomorrow that in my world you had to work for this rank. By showing over and over again what I could do under pressure and against all odds, I carefully looked over every part of my outfit for loose threads or spots that needed care. The ritual calmed me down, and the familiar routine kept me grounded, even though being at home was making me feel bad. By the time dawn came, I had got over how bad yesterday's dinner made me feel. The uniform was hanging up, and my hair was pinned exactly as rules, and I was determined to stick to my guns. Today, Colonel Natalie Williams would report that I was dressed for job and not like the disappointing daughter they thought they knew. I practiced how to use every button and pin. Put precisely, the person in the mirror showed confidence and power and purpose. There was no sign of the shy girl who had once longed desperately for her parents' praise. The colonel's badge on my collar, I told myself that this wasn't about getting even. It was about finally being honest with my family about who I was, good or bad, if they could. If they don't accept my success on my terms, it will be their loss, not mine. My watch was a gift from General Eleanor. The business event was about to start. In an hour, and I had to get there early to work out plans. With the security team, I heard my parents and Gregory was getting ready to leave on his own. They had no idea I would be joining them, much less than what was supposed to be there. I waited until I heard their cars leave before going downstairs and out to my room. Own car. It didn't take long to get to Pinnacle Defense Systems, and I used that time to calm down. Going over important parts of the deal I was going to talk about today. This wasn't just to show my family who I had. It was about making sure that a very important national security project got the attention it needed, as I pulled into the special parking spot marked Military Liaison. I put my uniform back in place one last time. The weight of duty felt much more natural on my shoulders than the weight of family expectations ever had. No matter who was watching, the Pinnacle Defense Systems, it was time for me to take on the part I had earned. The headquarters stood out in front of me like a shining symbol of business success and the military-industrial relationship. The glass and steel building was home to some of the most cutting-edge technology in the country. Such as the internet, I was now in charge of the building's security devices. As expected, security at the entrance was tight. I went up to the guard station with a bunch of secret projects, and 2 security guards stood up straight. The moment they saw my dress and rank, they said, "Good morning, Colonel." The guard saw the silver eagle on my shoulder right away and asked to see my ID, which I duly produced. My military ID and permission to work on the project Colonel Natalie Williams' Pentagon contact for Project Aegis. The guard's eyes got a little bigger as he thought about my clearance. "Yes, ma'am. You should be in the main meeting room. Would you like to go? I know the way, so I won't need a guide. In fact, I studied the building plan in great detail before I got there. As I went through the security checkpoint, I could feel the change in the atmosphere. Military leaders in my rank didn't go to regional offices very often, and certainly not ones as young as me. As I walked by, employees stopped what they were doing to politely nod. Others were clearly interested in me. The lift took me to the executive floor where the meetings for the day would be held. When the doors opened, I saw my brother, Gregory, looking over notes on a tablet. He looked up briefly and then widened in shock as he noticed me and my outfit. "Natalie, what are you wearing? Where are you going and why are you wearing that?" There is confusion and the first signs of... He looked scared when he saw the colonel's badge. "Good morning, Gregory," I politely told him. "I'm here for the project review," and he couldn't answer. My dad turned the corner and was talking with 2 other executives. He stopped talking in the middle of a sentence when he saw me. His face quickly changed from surprise to confusion to worry. "Natalie, what's going on? On why you're wearing a uniform?" He quickly looked around, clearly worried about Dad. I saw with a nod that you were about to say something about what his co-workers might think. "To get ready for the meeting, which starts in 20 minutes. To be exact, the leaders are with my father." Looked at my rank insignia with increased recognition. One of them was Barbara Jenkins from Legal, stepped forward under her name tag and said, "Colonel, it's a pleasure to have you here. We didn't know you would be coming in person today. My dad's face pad, Colonel Natalie. What is this about?" I keep a professional attitude even though I know there are more people in the hallway watching. "I think CEO Murphy will explain everything in the meeting. Excuse me while I walked I could hear the whispered conversations going on behind me in the meeting room. Years of military training had taught me this. I knew I had to stay calm under pressure, but I couldn't deny the small pleasure I felt at seeing how shocked they were. The staff was already setting up the meeting room with refreshments and presentation, materials for the important meeting. The young woman who was setting up the water pictures almost dropped one when she saw me walk in. "Colonel, we didn't know you were going to be here in person. Do you need anything set up differently? Everything looks fine." "Thank you," I answered, sitting down in the spot set aside for the military liaison. Over the next 15 minutes, different. As executives and team leaders walked into the room, many of them announced themselves in a way that stood out. Being very different from how my family had treated me the night before, said they were surprised to see me in person because they were expecting a video call. My dad and brother walked in. They walked into the room together, both of them looking uneasy. They sometimes sat far away from me. Looking at me with confused looks, I focused on going over my notes, not giving them the joy they were looking for, of an answer before the meeting started at exactly 9 a.m. The door opened, and CEO Shannon Murphy walked in with her executive team following behind her. Shannon was a strong person who was known for being straight and smart with strategy. She had led Pinnacle to become one of the best defense companies in the country. The room went silent as she looked around at the people there. When she looked at me, her eyes stopped, and a smile spread across her face as she turned around and went straight for my place. "Colonel Williams," she said, extending her hand warmly. "It was a pleasant surprise to see you in person." I thought, we were supposed to be on a video call. I stood up and shook her hand. I was in town visiting family and thought this would be a good time to look over the job, and Shannon gave a grateful nod and said, "Excellent idea. Your presence will definitely make today's talks more useful." She spoke to the group, her voice strong with power, for those who don't know, Colonel Williams is our contact at the Pentagon for Project Aegis. She will be in charge of the implementation of the new security standards and is in charge of giving final approval to all technical details. From across the room, I could see my dad's jaw drop. Gregory was looking at me as if he were seeing a "Hello, stranger. It's Colonel Shannon." With a polite nod, he continued, "Good morning. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts today." The meeting started with project updates from a number of team leads, addressed their views to both Shannon and me, recognizing that I was in charge of the military parts of the project when mechanical questions came up about how to connect it to other defense systems, everyone looked to me for answers. In my replies, I used my years of experience to give a thorough analysis and clear instructions, specialized knowledge. Every time I spoke, I could see my dad and brother, swapping shocked looks as their worldview clearly fell apart. When it was time for Gregory to give his speech, his usually sure voice shook. "I have come up with a more efficient way to do things as the team lead for user interface integration." He caught my attention. "Please keep going, Mr. Williams. I told you professionally as if he were any other host and not my brother Gregory, who had laughed at my choice of work just 12 hours before, was clearly confused by my appearance and position as he gave his speech. When he was done, I asked several sharp technical questions that showed holes in his plans, not because they were mean, but because the project needed it. Careful examination. These are significant issues that need to be dealt with before we can accept this phase. Please send in the updated specs by the end of the week." My dad watched this conversation he looked shocked as he saw his daughter hold his son accountable, his daughter, whom he had ignored for years, as wasting her ability. As the meeting went on, it became clearer that to everyone in the room that I was an expert and had authority that they should honor. My family was seeing for the first time what my military friends and bosses had known for years. By the time Shannon the meeting 3 hours later, the balance of power had been changed forever. "Colonel Williams will stay on," she said. "I could do security checks on the site until tomorrow. Expect everyone to give her access to and knowledge about whatever she needs. This project is very important to." As soon as the room was empty, Shannon spoke about national security and Pinnacle's future. "Came up to me again, Colonel. I have to say that your name is well-deserved. General Grant says nice things about you, but seeing you work today backs up everything I've heard from the corner. With the corner of my eye, I could see my dad hovering, nearby, eager to talk to me, but didn't know how to approach the moment of revelation had come, and there was no going back. The meeting room slowly got empty, leaving only my family and a few top executives who were talking to Shannon Murphy. My dad hung out nearby. Gregory stood at the edge of the group, clearly having a hard time processing what he had just seen. His earlier confidence gone, and in its place confusion and a dawning awareness I didn't know about the family drama going on when Shannon motioned for me to join her small group. Colonel Williams let me in. Meet our top team in person. You may already know some of them from the project documentation, but it's always better to talk in person. So I gave her a polite nod and joined her. Put a light hand on my shoulder, which would have been rude for a CEO to do. Everyone, this is Colonel Natalie Williams from the Pentagon's junior team. Colonel Williams has been the main point of contact for Project Aegis and has been very helpful in creating the security standards. That will be the foundation of our system. His name is Thomas Bailey, and he is the Senior Vice President of Engineering. Colonel, your name is known before you even start this work. Adaptive defenses against risks to quantum computing were revolutionary. We have put some of your ideas into action, already made suggestions. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I appreciate how the academic work is being used in real life. Answered. I am well aware that my father and brother are watching this conversation with shock in their eyes. Shannon then continued, until she got to my dad. And of course, you know Albert Williams, who is our head of regional ops. Albert has worked for Pinnacle for almost 30 years. And awkward, as everyone took note of our shared last name, there was quiet. Shannon looked between. As she realized what was going on, she looked at Williams and asked, Are you related? Nice answer, my dad stepped forward and said, She's my daughter. Voice a complicated mix of confusion and a new feeling I had never heard him show before. Was it respect for your daughter Shannon, who looked truly shocked? Albert, you didn't say that your daughter was Colonel Williams, the Colonel Williams who has been in charge of our biggest deal with the service. My dad had a hard time finding the right words. Shannon looked at me with a questioning look because she didn't know what Natalie's present job was. I kept my professional face. Despite the personal undercurrents, my family and I haven't had much time to talk about my job progression. I just told Gregory that he couldn't hold it in any longer. No longer stepped forward. You can't be serious. You're the colonel that everyone knows. Been talking about the one who gives the final go-ahead for the whole project. Yes, as promised. I've been in charge of Project Aegis for the past 6 months since I was promoted to full colonel. Father said again, Your voice is hollow. You've been a colonel for 6 months? And haven't told us. She felt more and more uncomfortable as she realized she had stepped into a family fight. Well, this is definitely Colonel Williams. This is a surprise. Since you are here in person, you might want to explain your role to the team directly. We should make the most of it. I agreed and thanked the professional for the reroute. Project Aegis is, of course, a $2 billion investment in the next new age of cybersecurity infrastructure. As the military liaison, it's my job I went to the front of the line to make sure that all developments meet Pentagon standards and security needs. Opened the presentation screen in the room to show an overview of the project. As I spoke, I could see the emotions on their faces, change on the bosses' faces from interest to real respect. My knowing both the technical details and the long-term effects showed exactly why I was in my job. All important. Before moving forward with design decisions, budget allocations, and execution. Strategies, I need to give my approval, I continued. My brother gasped when he heard the words, This includes staffing decisions for key positions. Shannon nodded in agreement as I made my last point. He was probably remembering his boast about leading a new team on the project. Finished my summary. As you can see, we're lucky to have Colonel Williams leading this project. Unmatched, and she has full authority over this subject. The executives agreed. Many people agreed and were making notes. My dad sat still in his chair. expression that can't be read. In fact, Shannon went on, Colonel Williams will be over the next 2 days. We'll be evaluating the work of all of our team leads to see how we're doing and what resources we need. Gregory's face turned from pale to white. He had laughed last night about how my career has been pointless and how I would now be judging his work as the meeting ended. She pulled me away and said, Connell, I didn't know Albert was your dad. That's a very proud moment for your family, I said with a polite smile. Definitely a big moment. Well, they should be very proud of your work is great. I've told Albert many times how lucky we are to have such a good military partner on this project. My dad heard this conversation as he walked up. His face was now a mix of confusion and what Natalie, he seemed to be feeling sorrow, and he started having trouble figuring out how to talk to me in this situation. We need to talk about to be polite, I answered. I have a short meeting with the security team, and then I can meet you in your office at 111 a.m. He just nodded and was used to getting schedule instructions from me. The directors were leaving, and I could hear them chatting about the shocking news. Did you know that her father was Colonel Williams, which is why she rose so quickly and had people in high places, like that? I think she turned down any family ties and did it all on her own. Merritt Thomas Bailey's last word was heard loud and clear throughout the room, making my dad stop in his tracks. It was clear that I had gotten where I was not because of my family ties, but even though they didn't back her up, the truth was finally coming out, which opened the door for that I finally understood. At exactly 11 a.m., knocked on my dad's office door. Through the glass document, I could see both my dad and my mother and brother as well. After what happened in the morning, someone must have called my mom to come to the office. My dad called out, "Enter," but his voice didn't sound like it usually does. I closed the door behind me and walked in while still wearing my uniform. Diana leaned against the side of a chair, her face changing from one of confusion to something that looked like Gregory stood by the window with his arms crossed across his chest, almost out of fear. "Please sit down," my dad said, pointing to the chair across from him, from his desk. "Thank you, but I'd rather stand," I answered automatically. The Addie's position, hands clasped behind my back. There was a strange silence. The room until my dad finally asked, "Why didn't you tell us all this time?" "We thought," I asked my dad in a quiet voice. "You thought I was I was hiding from real competition the fact that I had a lot of potential but would never amount to anything in the service. They were fired over the years without me speaking up. We didn't know." "How could we know if you never told us?" asked my mom. "I sent you invitations to every promotion ceremony." I replied that I called after every new task and emailed articles when the work was cleared enough for the public to see, but a colonel, my father, said, "I'm still having trouble with the idea of that being a very high rank." Yes, I checked, that it's about the same as a corporate vice president. I was right on the mark with this comparison. It made both my dad and brother sit up straighter. Gregory asked in an angry tone, "Do you have control over our contract?" "Is that why you came home to surprise us and make me look bad in front of Shannon?" "I came home because it had been after 5 years," I responded. "Despite everything, you are my family." With the contract review was a coincidence, though it was admittedly handy. "It was convenient," my dad said again. Angry. "You show up to work in uniform without telling me. Do you have any think about how this will look? People will think I bribed them to get my daughter to work on our project." I had to laugh. "At that, Dad. That's why I've spent my whole career staying away from any business dealings with yours. I think General Grant gave me this job because I know a lot about adaptive cybersecurity systems, and my General Grant's track record with similar measures. My mother asked my captain and mentor, she has been what you could have been all these years. Helpful, tough when needed, and proud of The words hit home, and I saw my mother flinch. That was all there was to it. Gregory wanted to show us up and make us look stupid for not believing in your military future. No, I said firmly. This was about doing my job, the job I trained for and gave up things to do. Did really well, and it's not my fault that you never took it seriously. Father stood up, finally showing anger after being shocked. You could have warned us, he said. You let us think you were still a junior officer putting paper in a drawer on purpose. Would it have been, I asked quietly. When have any of you ever shown real interest in my career? Last night at dinner, none of them had. Not a single important question about my job or life was asked of me. It was all about Gregory's rise, Tiffany's apartment. The truth of this statement was up in the air for us. Always wanted the best for you, my mom said softly. No, I told her. You wanted me to do what you knew was best for me. You wanted me to take the path you knew and valued. You decided that my choice was wrong instead of taking into account that I might know what was best for me, life. My dad sat back down in his chair, his anger building up. Your brother. He is doing well after following the plan. I am happy for Gregory, I said in an earnest voice. Gregory uncrossed his arms and took a step back. But that was never going to be my path. I needed something different. A little less harshly. All these years we thought you were just stuck going nothing. I know what you thought, I answered. You made it very clear. Every time we talked, you said, you'll never be anything in the military. Exact words last night, Greg. He was ashamed enough to show it. I didn't know I told them. You never asked, and none of you did. My mom suddenly stood up, changing their face. Now we know, and of course we're very, very proud. Yes, I did tell your dad that working in the military was a good job. That revised history was so common that I almost laughed out loud. Mom, please don't do that again. Do that. Don't act like you've always been there for her. That hurts any chance of an honest recovery. Natalie. My mouth opened and closed, and I'm used to being direct refuted. For the first time since the meeting, my dad asked, "What do you want from us now?" Using my name instead of my rank. I answered, respect. I wanted to say sorry, get public praise, and get what I'd always wanted. Because of the choices I made and the fact that my path, even though it's not what you had planned, has worth and meaning, all I've ever asked for. The room was quiet again as they thought about what I said. Finally, my dad got up and walked over to me. For a second, I thought he was going to try to hug me, but he stopped and put out his arm. His hand properly instead. Colonel Williams, he said with a heavy heart, I owe you an apology, an important one. I didn't notice your accomplishments and brush them off. Job, because I was biased and didn't know enough about it. I was wrong. The formality of his approach was so typical of him, but the statement was brand new, so I agreed. He shook Dad's hand and said, Thank you. I still don't get everything you said. But I'd like to learn if you're willing to teach me, he said. That was more than I had expected, and I felt something tight in my chest started to loosen up. I'd like it if my mother came up next, less at ease with I told her I was sorry. We should have come to your ceremonies instead. She tried to say sorry, but it was as close as she could get at the time, and I felt bad about it. Gregory stayed by the window and clearly was having a hard time inside. Finally, he spoke up. So you above me by a large amount. Greg, this is not a game. It always has been, I replied. Mom and Dad set us up that way, he responded with surprising insight. Right from the start, I had the advantage of going down the road they already liked. It was the since my brother last told me the truth. We both went our separate ways. Be worth something? He slowly nodded. For what it's worth. What I saw in that meeting, I could never do what you do today because I don't have the technical understanding you have, being a leader. It was impressive. Not really impressive. Coming Gregory, this was the same as a full prostration and apology. I felt the The last of my defenses starts to come down. Thank you. My dad took down his Shannon. Really wants to have dinner with all of us tonight now that she knows we are family. I was pleased with you, Natalie. I know I just let a small smile out of my mouth. Of course you do, my dad said, shaking his head in what looked like new respect. You probably know more about how this company works than I do right now. I told them only the secret parts and got a... He let out a real laugh. Maybe the first. One we had shared in years. The stress in the room changed into something new, maybe even hopeful. There was damage to fix years ago of being fired and hurt to deal with. But for the first time, I felt like my family really saw me. I looked at my watch and said, I have another meeting to get to. But I'm happy to join you all for dinner tonight with Shannon. As I turned to leave, my mom called out, Natalie, I found it hard to say, I know, Mom. So I said softly, one step at a time. I shut the door and left my family to deal with the new. In fact, their daughter and sister wasn't nothing. She was Colonel Natalie Williams. She had earned every bit of the respect she was getting now. 6 months later, I hosted my family over for dinner at my place in Washington, D.C. The 2-bedroom condo is very roomy. The view of the PT WAC was very different from my childhood house in Montana, but it had become my safe place over the past few years. The way our family worked was still changing, but progress was. Without a doubt, my dad Albert was the first one there, holding a framed news story about the successful implementation of Project Aegis and my part in it. He had it professionally, framed, and was happy to show it off in his office. He said in a shy voice, I thought you might want a copy for your wall as well. The story had a picture of me in dress with General Eleanor and Shannon Murphy at the start of the project. Thank you, Dad. That's very kind of you, I answered, deeply moved by the act. 6 months ago, he would have thought that military recognition didn't matter. My childhood favorite apple pie was brought to us by my mother, Diana. Trying to connect was still awkward, but sincere. She quit comparing me to other people. Gregory or Tiffany, instead of asking me real questions about my work, she said, Your apartment is lovely, Natalie, which is not labeled. So neat and organized, she said as she looked around at the simple but beautiful decor. Military precision, I joked, and she laughed instead of taking it as a threat. A chance to criticize my job choice Gregory and Megan showed up last, bringing a pricey bottle of wine. The most shocking change was in my brother. After the initial shock wore off, he came up to me and asked if I was interested in my job and career path. As we sat in the I put those security measures in place that you mentioned last month in the living room before dinner. The team thought I thought you were funny for coming up with them. Did you give credit where credit is due? Was his? He smiled sheepishly. After being praised for about 5 minutes, but seriously, the implementation went well and the client is happy. Thanks for the hard work. I really meant it. Your team does a great job. Now being acknowledged meant more to him than any family platitude ever had started to treat me like a peer, not just his little sister. It was my dad who had been, looking at me. The military awards that were sitting quietly on my shelves looked at me and said, "I read that. There was a story last year about the cyber attack you helped stop. I didn't understand all the technical details, but it sounded important, and I checked that it was. We caught it early, which was lucky lives were at stake," he asked, starting to understand how important my work. "Yes, infrastructure security could touch everyone," he said. "I always thought that being in the military was about fighting. But I never thought about the internet battlefield. Most people don't," I agreed. "That's one reason why we can be effective. Enemies don't always see, 'We're coming.'" The doorbell rang, and I got up to answer it. Eleanor Grant stood in the hallway. Even though she wasn't on duty, her outfit was as spotless as ever. General met me with a warm smile, and I smiled back. "Thank you for welcome to our dinner tonight. I invited Eleanor because she was in town for meetings, and also because I wanted my family to meet the woman who had faith in me when they didn't. Brigadier General Eleanor Grant, my boss and guide, is in the living room. This is my story. Family." My dad stood up right away and extended his hand with the same level of respect he would show a high-level business person. "Executive General Grant, it's an honor to have you here." Being aware of Natalie's promise, Eleanor gave him a firm handshake. "Mr. Williams, I was always there. I just gave it the chance to grow." My mother rushed forward. "In general, please relax. Dinner is almost ready." We moved too. At the dinner table, the conversation flowed more naturally than at any other family meeting I can think of. Eleanor told stories about military life that helped my parents understand the world I lived in, while being very careful not to say anything secret. Facts: Natalie designed a simulation program that is now standard training for all cybersecurity. Personnel, she says, told them during the main meal that her method cut down on successful breaches in training scenarios by 63% of the time. I saw my parents really take in this information. Maybe for the first time, what I had done. "We didn't know," my mother said quietly. "All these years we didn't know. What you were really up to, you never asked. I told them, but without the just 6 months ago, those words would have been tinged with anger. But now you know, and that's what counts." While our parents talked to Eleanor, Gregory helped me clean up the dishes. He said quietly, "I spent years. I thought I was ahead of you in life by getting promotions, moving up in the company, and making links. Greg, I told you that you were playing a very different game at a much higher level. It was never a competition. Him. And I know that he now knows. I'm sorry for making it one of these. During that painful family dinner 6 months ago, real times of connection would have seemed impossible. Wasn't finished, and probably never would be, but it was real growth." Later, while we sipped coffee and ate my mom's apple pie, my dad raised his glass and said, "To Colonel Natalie Williams," he said, with a voice that carried a clear note of pride, "who proved to go to amazing places when you follow your own way. We may have been slow to see it, but we could not be prouder now," I said as I raised my glass with the others. I felt at peace. It had been a long time since I had felt validated in my childhood home. Once desperately sought from my family no longer defined me, but their acknowledgement did help me in the end. It was never about showing them they were wrong. It was about becoming the person I was meant to be, whether they liked it or not. Had finally come to respect my choices wasn't the win. In making those decisions for myself the whole time. What about you? Have you ever had people who should have backed you ignore your accomplishments? How did you deal with it? Share your story in the comments below. Also, if this story touched you, please click like. Click the subscribe button to hear more. Stories of strength and success. Don't forget to share with anyone who needs it. To remember that showing yourself on your own terms is sometimes the best way to feel good about yourself. Listen, and remember that your path is right. Even if other people don't see it that way,